know that there has only ever been one ship to collide with an iceberg in the history of mankind? That ship was the Titanic. Years before Jack fell crazy in love with Rose, the Titanic captivated the minds of people around the world as the classically unsinkable ship in all of history of shipbuilding. But it soon became one of the worst tragedies in maritime history. There are so many weird facts about the Titanic that people still don't know about. Today, we'll uncover some of these weird Titanic facts, proving that the unsinkable ship that struck an iceberg and sank is still one of the weirdest disasters to hit mankind. Here's our top 10 weirdest facts about the Titanic. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and also click the notification button so that you can be notified whenever we have new videos with more awesome facts. Number 10. A Japanese survivor. There was only one Japanese who survived the Titanic. Masabumi Hosono was the only Japanese who traveled on the world-famous ship and was also among the passengers who survived the tragic fall of the Titanic. When he somehow managed to get back to Japan, he lost his job and was even called a coward by his people because it was believed that he disguised himself as a female to get on one of the lifeboats. According to the Japanese, Hosono should have saved the lives of women and children and then had an honorable death instead of saving his own life and disgracing Japan in the eyes of the world. Number 9. The musicians of the Titanic. The band members aboard the Titanic was made up of 8 musicians led by Wallace Hartley. That emotional moment in the movie when the Titanic was sinking and the band members continued to play to calm down the passengers. Well, that actually happened in real life. They played for 4 hours even after the ship hit the iceberg and began to sink. Music aboard the ship was elegant and graceful background entertainment. The music in the Titanic would complement the passengers' card games and nights of conversations. Sadly, all the musicians died in that disaster, but they are remembered today for their heroism. Number 8. Hershey's chocolates. Yes, that same Hershey's chocolates you know too well. Milton S. Hershey, the founder of Hershey's Chocolates Company, had put down a deposit for a VIP room aboard the Titanic. The check for the transaction is still in the Hershey Community Archives. He and his wife had taken a vacation to France. When it was time to return home, he wanted him and his wife to spend days at sea in luxury, which was why he put down the deposit on the VIP room. The exact reason why Hershey abandoned the Titanic trip at the last minute is not known, because the company only said that he found it necessary to return to the United States earlier than planned. Regardless of what happened, Hershey did not board the Titanic as planned. Rather, he and his wife hopped on the German ship America, which resulted in their escaping the tragedy. Number 7. The dogs of the Titanic. A dozen dogs were also aboard the ship on its tragic maiden voyage, but just 3 survived. But how did 3 dogs get space in lifeboats when there wasn't even enough room for human passengers? The dogs that survived were all very small dogs. They were so small that no one even noticed them being carried aboard the lifeboat. 2 of the dogs were Pomeranians, and the last was a Pekingese. One of the little Pomeranian was named Lady and belonged to a Titanic passenger named Miss Margaret Hayes in Paris. Lady shared a cabin with Miss Hayes and was wrapped in a blanket and carried onto a lifeboat by her when the order was given to evacuate. Number 6. Bodies of the Titanic. It's reported that most dead bodies of the tragic end of the Titanic were found floating on sea, and they looked like they were sleeping. Each body was checked for proper identification, and reportedly, all first-class bodies were taken back to shore. The other 116 bodies were attached to weights and buried in the sea. Most people died of overexposure to cold rather than drowning. Only about 300 bodies were recovered. Number 5. The lifeboats. The Titanic crew only had 7 days to prepare for her voyage. At the time, most bigger and more luxurious ships in the world needed months of preparation. This resulted in the captain cancelling crew lifeboat training. The training was never rescheduled nor conducted. The night that the Titanic hit the iceberg was the first time the crew had ever attempted to bring out the lifeboats. The Titanic had a total capacity for 3,547 people, while the ship had just 18 lifeboats on board that had the capacity for 65 people each, which was obviously not enough. There wasn't even enough space on lifeboats for even half of the people on the ship. Strangely though, over half those 18 lifeboats were only half full. If the lifeboats had carried full to its capacity, about 1,178 more people would have survived. But sadly, just 705 people of the 2,223 people on board survived the sinking of the Titanic. Number 4. The novel. About 14 years before the sinking of the Titanic, an American author wrote a novel called Futility, The Wreck of the Titan, written by Morgan Robertson. This novel was written even before the Titanic was thought about or imagined, but there were some strange similarities between both the novel and the real-life Titanic. Just like the Titanic, the fictional ship sank in the month of April in the North Atlantic, and there were not even enough lifeboats for all the passengers. There were also some similarities between the size, 244 meters long for the Titan versus 269 meters long for the Titanic. After the Titanic's sinking, some people credited Robertson with precognition and clairvoyance, although Robertson denied these credits. Number 3. The Key. About 95 years after the tragic sinking of the Titanic, a key was put up for auction. This doesn't seem so interesting, but this key was believed to open the crow's nest locker, which contained binoculars, a piece of equipment that could potentially have saved the Titanic from its tragic end. Binoculars were of course vital equipment in detecting threats for liners at that time. The owner of the key, Officer David Blair, was removed from the crew right before the Titanic set sail, and because of the haste of the change, he forgot to give the key to his replacement. They had to use their eyes to look out for any threat. It had been said that if they had binoculars, they would have seen the iceberg sooner. Number 2. The shoes. In the year 2004, a photograph was taken of a pair of shoes lying on the ocean floor at the wreckage sites of the Titanic. This photo was released to the public on the 100th anniversary of the Titanic's sinking. The shoes were found placed so close together that they were believed to have probably been once worn on a victim, but the body had since disintegrated. The only belongings left of the passengers who did not survive are the clothes they had on and their jewelry, mainly their shoes. Number 1. The first Titanic movie. There was a Titanic movie that was released just 29 days after its sinking. Tell me about a more insensitive act. As if that wasn't bad enough, Dorothy Gibson, who was a popular actress at the time and starred in the movie, was actually a survivor of the Titanic she experienced that horrible night. It's reported that Dorothy never wanted to appear in the movie, titled Saved from the Titanic, initially because the horrible incident was barely a month old. But the producers, who saw it as a juicy business opportunity, forced her to do the movie because of its captivating story. The movie was completed in a week. When the film was released, many critics were irritated that a studio would produce a movie about one of the worst maritime disasters in history, barely 1 month after it occurred. With that, we conclude our list for the top 10 weirdest facts about the Titanic. It would also interest you to know that the famous movie, Titanic, cost more money to produce than the actual ship itself. The most famous shipwreck in the history of maritime continues to fascinate us all, even more than 100 years later, and it has remained as horrific, as shocking, and mysterious as it did on that fateful night it sank. Thanks for taking your time to view this video. Please click the like, subscribe, and notification button so that you'll never miss any of our awesome videos.